Basically, what the basis of the conversation today is really shining a light and focusing on what you're what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, what you're doing and or not doing with your existing clients, and how do you have better conversations with your existing customers that drives new revenue and actually helps you grow your business, and more importantly, gets you focused on growing referral partnerships and doing that in a way that scales. So um, I often talk about a time when I actually went to work for one of my referral partners. I went into their business and I got the obligatory laptop, the onboarding orientation course, and here's the CRM. And I actually found an introduction that I'd made to them 2 years earlier that there'd been crickets. There was nothing in the CRM. Nobody had followed up. There was no focus on it. I went and had 2 coffees with this guy, and within 6 months, we'd written $11.2 million worth of contracted business. That essentially means that for the previous 2 years where they did nothing, there was an opportunity cost there of about $44 million. And it was invisible to the business. Opportunity costs sitting in your existing network, opportunity costs sitting in your existing CRM contact database. Because you're not looking for them, typically businesses are not looking for them, therefore it's invisible, therefore it's an opportunity cost, right? So that's just a bit of a concept I want you to think about as we go through this. So I talked briefly about Frank just before we got started. I would encourage you to go to Frank's website, frankagent.com, and have a look at what Frank's doing. I know there's a lot of connections of Frank's in this room right now. Have a look at what he's doing with AmSpirit, what he's doing with the Network Hub, and actually jump into those communities, because your networking's accelerated when you're in the right rooms. And I've always found that any room that Frank's in is the right room. You can find both Frank and myself on LinkedIn. I'm not going to sort of go deep into our bios right now. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The discussion is on growing sales via referrals and effective business networking. The Q&A window for some reason is not open, so just drop your questions into chat and we'll circle back from that as best we can. And then what we'll do is at the end, I'll give you some resources on how you can start to quickly and easily leverage some of the ideas that we're going to talk about. Before we sort of go through that list, because don't want to make this a sort of this is definitely not an AI conversation, but I do want to raise a few things shortly. But Frank, you often talk about the big mistakes that people make when they're networking, they're asking for referrals, they're going to networking events. I'd love it if you could just sort of run through those, just to give people a little bit of a context. And I think that'll lay a good foundation for the rest of the conversation as well.
Well, I mean, people make lots of mistakes networking. And I think probably the biggest mistake is they confuse it with sales. They confuse it with, okay, they'll walk into an event, or they'll have a Zoom call, or be on, in some sort of structured activity, and measure it based on some expectation of outcome that they had, and in doing that, they lose sight of the notion that, okay, maybe I didn't make a sale, but something happened, right? I mean, I built a relationship. In fact, I had a conversation earlier today with somebody, and I always talk about golf, and I use golf as a metaphor. I don't golf. I understand golf. A lot of people understand golf, but I tell people, when you golf, it's not a game of going out and hitting 6-inch putts or knocking the ball 400 yards into a hole you can't even see. It's about piecing together a sequence of shots that ultimately gets you to where you need to be. And that's how I look at networking, is that there are some interactions that we have that aren't meant to be our clients, but they're the people that connect us to the people that connect us, that ultimately connect us to our clients. And so that's, generally speaking, that's that's the big miss. Is people they just lack patience. Derek, is really what it boils down to.
It comes down to systems and processes and having those in place and just being clear and practicing, tweaking and refining. It's a skill. To Frank's point, a lot of people are very active and busy, but they're not effective at what they're doing. And that's some of the things that we're going to sort of touch on as we get into this. But some interesting things for me is, some of the conversation I'm hearing in the marketplace, and this is not an AI event, but some of the things I'm hearing is like there's a trust economy or a trust recession in place. So there's an AI arms race going on at the moment, and everybody thinks that this cold outreach via AI is going to be the answer. And it's quite interesting because I had someone advocate for the fact that they're doing AI digital twinning and trying to clone their own voice so that they can automate their own marketing. And then in the next breath, they basically said real relationships and networks are the only thing that's going to really matter moving forward because AI is going to be so prolific, you can't trust anything. So therefore, it's your actual human relationships, your actual personal networks that are going to be the value. And that I agreed with. The thing that I found interesting was they're talking about using AI at the front end to actually get engagement. And there was a disconnect for me on how that was actually building relationships. So yeah, something to think about. And I touched on this earlier about a concept that I heard for the first time yesterday called the social media desert. And it was a marketer in the industrial and in the industrial sector, mining sector, in mid to large tier enterprises. And he was talking about a colleague of his that was basically forecasting the fact that a whole bunch of AIs will be talking to each other and it won't be humans. And that's what our marketing will come down to. It'll be your bot talking to my bot, blah, blah, blah. And then where do you actually get the penetration and cut through to actually have a real conversation? And this is very, very, very relevant in the B2B space, right? Where you've got high ticket items and you've got longer sales cycles, more complex sales cycles. So getting that piece right is going to be, to your point, Christy, the human element that's going to differentiate you. That's a really good point. So just for a bit of context, what we're going to be talking about is how do you actually extract new opportunities, more revenue, and new partnership conversations from your existing client base, your existing contacts, and the prospects that you're actually engaging with day to day. And this forms part of the discovery aspects of our referral marketing formula. Each part of the formula, there's nine core areas that we focus on. Each part builds on each other, but we're just going to look at this in isolation. I'm going to give you some takeaways around how to actually get more out of the conversations that you're having. And if you're not having regular strategic conversations with your clients, then maybe that's something that you should be weaving into your processes. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that, just to give you a little bit of a context. So with the idea that moving forward, your relationships and your networks are going to be your safety net and your biggest asset. Again, in that B2B space, I'm not your B2C expert here, so just bear that in mind as we sort of go through this. But Frank, keen to get your thoughts on what you're seeing in the marketplace, because you've got a unique perspective with the M Spirit franchise network, where there's bricks and mortar businesses coming together to collaborate and do referrals and business networking. And then you've got the networking hub with the online process that you take people through. So keen to get your thoughts on where you see the whole AI piece and relationships.
Yeah, I mean, for those who are familiar with like BNI, that's really what AmSpirit is. Um, it's a weekly meeting made up of smaller entrepreneurs. Uh, what I found interesting with that, when the COVID lockdown hit, we all went online. And the moment it was over, people wanted to go back in person. Um, I think 98% of our groups are back in person. And that just, for me, underscored the whole notion that people would prefer to be in person as opposed to be online. It's hard to compare it to things like the networking hub, where Derek, you and I have met, because by its very nature, it's an online thing. It came about during COVID, which is it's a monthly call and people come in, and it's a whole lot less structured, and the expectations are a whole lot less. In the AmSpirit world, where people are coming together, the expectation is largely referrals. That's why people judge whether they're going to stay or not stay. It's all referrals. Well, I mean, Bob said it. I mean, people would prefer to interact. I mean, people want to come together. And the questions I've gotten over the years, for me, AI is just the latest of a lot of things, right? Let's go back a few hundred years. All we did was communicate face to face. There was no postal system or anything like that. I mean, people were sharing out letters, but it was nothing organized. And we did business with those we knew, we liked, we trusted. And then the telegraph came along, and it just allowed us to communicate further and faster, but we still did business with those we know, like, and trust. Telephone, same thing. Email, same thing. Not so long ago, I was getting people asking me questions, interviewing me, getting me to come in and talk about LinkedIn and how LinkedIn was going to change business. And my response was, it's not. LinkedIn is just another tool to help us communicate.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, as social media groups have also, what I've seen is there's been a reduction in engagement across platforms. I mean, LinkedIn groups has always been a bit of a farce, but big challenge moving forward is a lot of these platforms are going to become a lot noisier, and therefore it's going to be the events and the live in-person events, whether be it online or offline, that's going to be the differentiator moving forward. One of the strategies that you can use in your conversations, and it becomes a mindset thing, right? Making the shift between, because we're talking about differentiation here, right? It's how do you become different to every other product and service provider in your marketplace? How do you stand out? How do you become the trusted advisor? Because what we're seeing with AI now is that product and service are becoming less of a differentiator. Many products and services are being commoditized. It's how you show up with your clients and how you engage with your clients that's going to be the point of difference. I mean, at the end of the day, delivering on your promises, actually, being a good person, having great relationships, that gets referred leads, but referred leads are very different to having a referral marketing strategy in place in your business. When you've got a referral marketing strategy, a system and a process and frameworks that you and your team can execute on consistently, that's when you actually have a model that you can grow on demand via referrals. And there's some of the concepts that I want to sort of touch on today. So as you're going through and you're looking at social media and you're coming across ideas and content, sharing those ideas, sharing that information, but also being very deliberate about sharing connections in a very strategic way is where your value is going to be above and beyond your products and services. And it's where you and your team are going to elevate yourself to that trusted advisor status with your clients. So and this is not a LinkedIn session. I don't want to do a deep dive into LinkedIn necessarily, but there's some really interesting strategies and tactics that you can put in place that if you're deliberate as you're doom scrolling through LinkedIn, you can basically be a lot more tactical with the way that you're engaging with content, whether the way that you're engaging with influencers and the way that you're sharing content. So you don't need to necessarily be part of the content creation noise. And I'm not saying don't create quality content and put it out on LinkedIn. You absolutely should, but you also don't need to create all of your own content. From a networking perspective, there can be a lot more value in you engaging with other people's content the right way. How you do that and how you get your team to do that is to make sure that you've got complete clarity around who your ideal customer profile is. I know I'm preaching to the converted because I know a lot of you guys in the room are very clear about your ICP and ideal referral partners. So the question is, are your customers as clear as you are about yours, and are you as clear about theirs? Because what we're seeing in the marketplace is a lot of businesses want referrals, but they're not actually giving referrals. And I'll get to that in a second. But the act of, as part of your customer engagement, quarterly business review, whatever the cycle, whatever you call your recurring, engagement cycle with your customers, having a very strategic way of having a partnership conversation with them, you will be amazed that if you just some simple languaging, simple questioning within your engagement, how much that gets referrals back to you as part of that conversation. So I'll dig into that and I'll be keen to get your thoughts on this in a second, Frank. It comes down to having simple question frameworks that you are running through consistently as part of your conversations. And it's really quite easy to do. But it's also having you and your sales teams having that give to get mentality. It's the number of businesses that I speak to that go, we're not getting referrals. And I go, well, are your sales team actually giving referrals? You've got a sales team, that could be you as a single person or a network of salespeople. Are they actually conscious of what their clients need from an ideal customer profile or an ideal partner profile perspective? Are they having that conversation with your clients? And are they actually, with all the networking that they're doing, the events, are they just thinking about themselves and their next deal? Or in all those conversations that might actually not be an ideal client for them, but it's a perfect client or introduction for one of your clients, are you making that connection? Because when you make that connection, now you are adding value way beyond your products and services, and your clients remember that. So the next person comes knocking on their door, they're very unlikely to churn, right? They're very unlikely to churn. So the thing that I'm seeing is when you lead with value, so even in net new first time conversations, now I use referral marketing as a cold outreach strategy. I also get a lot of referrals, as do most of you in the room, because I know a lot of you. One of the things that I'm finding is in first conversations, if you set the conversation up the right way and you're leading with value and you're leading with a mindset of service, in those first calls, the number of people that are actually trying to connect me into their network because I approach the conversation the right way and I'm going in with a very deliberate mindset of service, not to get a client, but how can I plug them into an opportunity, into information, into other people in my network that can help with other problems that are a priority for them right now. The act of doing that automatically has them by the end of the call, even if I'm not asking for it, asking me, how can they help me? That's the typical question. So it's about creating frameworks in and around that. And I know, Frank, you've forgotten more about reciprocity than I've probably ever learned. So I'm keen to get your sort of perspective on that give to get reciprocity angle.
Well, I don't know about forgetting and learning or whatever. I appreciate that, but I was on a conversation earlier. I was a young a friend of my kids. I knew him when he was in grade school. Now they're all grown up out there doing whatever. And he wanted to talk to me about networking, and I was trying to explain this to him, and just really, you have a formula on the screen there: retention plus referrals equals growth, and the whole reciprocity thing is formulaic too. And so what I explained to the kid, because I've known him since he was 6 years old, I said, you remember there was a time in your life where you didn't like girls, and then all of a sudden it was like the next day, all of a sudden you like girls. Um, and that's pre-programmed into into us as humans. It's part of maturing. And I went on to explain to him. I said, that's just one example of how we have this programming in our minds. And when you talk about reciprocity, it's programmed into us, and it goes back to when humans were very nomadic, and how we looked for people who are willing to contribute to the greater good of the clan or the tribe, and because we had to have those people, and if somebody was selfish, we would all be worse off. So we selected for this, what I'll call pro-social behavior. um, so I always find it interesting when we talk about these things, and there are people out there that kind of poo-poo the whole notion of reciprocity, poo-poo the whole notion of, oh, give to get. I'm not doing that. I got a better way, right? I'm just going to
Mm,
sell harder. I'm going to really hit them with facts and numbers and things like that. And it just doesn't work that way. That's just not how we're
yeah,
programmed.
yeah, yeah, and it's a really good point. And the thing that I'm seeing in the marketplace right now is that everybody is so focused on getting their next deal because they're under pressure to get their next deal, that when you actually come into a conversation and you're giving something of value straight up, it's like people are just not used to it. They're
Yeah.
simply not used to it because everybody that's usually in front of them is just trying to get something out of them. It's the old, the when you walk up to somebody at a networking event and you can see written on their forehead, "I want your list," right? Because of the way they come at you. So,
Yes.
when you're actually leading with value, and you have that service mindset, to Frank's point, we're wired to try and return the favor, but more so in the current market, people are not doing it. So you're actually standing out dramatically,
Yeah.
or they're doing it superficially. Right? So the thing about referral partnerships, when you have a structure around it, and I differentiate I differentiate referral marketing and getting referred leads like this. When you get referred leads because you're running a good business, you're delivering on your promises, and you're a nice person, that's relationship based. Those leads tend to come in an ad hoc, unpredictable way. When you actually have a referral marketing strategy, you have frameworks and you have a clear value proposition to a referral partner, then conversations move really quickly and you can grow referral partner relationships on demand. When you can do that, you can scale on demand based on your capacity to deliver. And whilst there's a lot of activity going on and a lot of noise in the enterprise corporate space around aligned partnerships with complex strategies, expensive software, and expensive headcount to manage those processes, and a need for big data. What there isn't in the SMB and SME space that we're seeing is a simplified model, simplified frameworks, and a way for you to actually run partnership programs in a programmatic or a systemized way within SMB and SME. And that's the problem. That's part of the problem that Frank solves. It's the problem that we solve, and the reason that we exist. So when you have a strong referral network that is incentivized to refer to you, and by incentivized, I'm not talking about because you give them money. Certain industries, certain people, the exchange of money might be the value that motivates them. In other business and industries and individuals, there needs to be another value exchange. So when I first connected with Frank, and I know that he's got a big network, my first assumption was, hey, we've got an affiliate program. It drives monthly recurring revenue. Hey, Frank, here's our affiliate program. That's going to motivate you. The first thing Frank said was, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in an affiliate program. I'm not interested in the money. I don't want it. Right. Different value proposition. I need to find what is the thing of value that I can deliver to, and I'm using Frank as an analogy here. What's the value? What's valuable to them? Getting a message out there for Frank, it was getting a message out there, it was growing network, it was getting people into his networking hub. But firstly, it was just me being present, showing up, and just being part of his rooms. So that was valuable to Frank. So I did that. As I got to know Frank and understood what he was trying to do, I was then able to add more value. And hence now Frank registers for an event and I go, hey, Frank, if you're going to be in that room, please be part of the conversation. So that's another way that I can add value to Frank. So it's like value comes in different forms. When you can, with your referral partners, when you can deliver value to their end client and value to their business at the same time, so it's a win-win-win scenario when they refer, then you become part of their business process. Therefore, they're taking you into more conversations. They're introducing more of their clients to you. It then comes down to, what does that value look like? What does the process look like? What are the activities that you need to do, or the things that you need to provide to that referral partner that's valuable to them, so that they actually take you out into their network en masse? So we look at getting referred leads as a one-to-one strategy. That clients are typically not great referrers. They're inconsistent and ad hoc. We then see referral partnerships as a one-to-more strategy, and then working with influencers is a one-to-many strategy. So when you can set in place systems and processes and frameworks around that, wrapped around a value proposition targeted to your ideal partner, you can actually use referral marketing as a concept and a strategy, and your value proposition to go out and actually do outbound engagement to your ideal referral partners. So then you don't need to necessarily be referred in. You can then be on the front foot for driving as many referral partners as you need, because you know exactly who you're looking for, what your value proposition is, and how to deliver it, right? So the result of that is higher quality leads, speed of sales cycle, because you're getting leads from referrals from a trusted advisor of that prospect. It drives higher conversion. Quite frankly, the people are more fun to work with because they are your ideal client, and you've got systems and processes, and they're less price resistant because of the way that the relationship has come to you. So finding your next referral partner is simply a matter, and this can be changed tomorrow. It can be changed next week. It's simply having a different conversation in a different way as part of the existing marketing, sales, and customer service processes that you're already going through right now, right? What we're not talking about here is some massive change management program. We're not talking about a massive, new marketing campaign cost. This is all deliverable within your existing business, your existing budget, and your existing effort. It's just a mindset shift, and then systemizing some of these processes, and then having a customer service and an account management process and framework that you can train yourself on, and then therefore train your people on. So what we see with a lot of business owners and founders, they drive business really hard, just by sheer weight of effort and energy and charisma, but they don't take the time to think about how do they then systemize that so that their next salesperson that they bring on has a track to run on to actually duplicate those results. And all the information you're consuming, a lot of it's going to be valuable to your customers and prospects. Act like a filter for them, because there's so much noise out there. If you're the one that's sending your prospects high quality information that's relevant to them and their market and their clients, then they're going to remember you for that. And it beats having to show up for a lunch, coffee, and or golf date every other quarter and talk about the same things all the time, right? It's only so many coffees people can have. So let's think about how you leverage other people's content and ideas as well as your own, and use LinkedIn in a really strategic way. So I want to jump into Q&A and basically have a conversation, take this conversation wherever you guys would like it to go. I've got some resources for you. I will circle back and actually give these to you